I was kind of surprised when my community asked for a weight painting tutorial as the first one in my series of tutorial videos. But given how important weight painting is to making 3D models, and how confusing it can be to someone who's just starting, I can kind of understand why. So I'm going to make the first part of this video your weight painting 101. This is going to kind of walk you through what weight painting is and how the frick to get started. Then in the latter half, I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks I've learned making models for 4+ years now. It's been a bit. Weight painting is essentially what determines how your model follows your armature. And so it is taking each vertex and telling it you are following this bone either 100%, 0%, or somewhere in between. But what does that look like practically? Well, let's look over at this very, very advanced setup that I have featuring our mesh, which is a cube, and we need to have this follow an armature. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an armature for it to follow. So I'm just going to create a single bone, and you can't see it, but it is in there. You can see the little bubble down there. But I really don't like not being able to see it. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it to be in front, and this is on your right hand side in this little armature menu. Under the viewport display you have in front. And then I personally am not a huge fan of seeing the entire thing. I prefer seeing the wireframe of it. So you have a much smaller thing you're looking at. And that's about all we're going to do for that armature first. So the first thing you're going to do is you are going to select your cube. You're going to go to the modifiers, this little wrench icon, and then you're going to add a modifier for armature, and you're going to drag in the armature that you've created. This tells your mesh what armature it should be trying to follow. But if you notice, if we go select the armature and then select the mesh and go into weight paint, where we can actually test out what we've got so far, if we select the bone, nothing's following it, because we haven't told it what it should be following, or what mesh parts should be following it. So if we take our draw tool here, and add to the corner here, and then try and move our bone, now we've got something following. So if you want everything to follow your root bone, or in this case our only bone, you're going to have to color this entire thing to be red. Now there are a couple ways you can do that, because as you can see I just used the draw tool there, but we also have tools like blur, which will smoothen out any edges, average, which does much the same but in a slightly different way. My recommendation is just to play with the two until you get something you like. Smear lets you push it, so you can just drag from one side to another. And then you have your gradient, which will let you actually create a smooth gradient. Since we're just trying to cover the whole thing, gradient a couple times covers everything. Now if we move this, cube follows entirely. But what if we want the cube to kind of sway and bend like it's a jelly cube? Well, let's go back to our armature and add a second bone so that we don't lose our root bone. So we're just going to go armature and then subdivide. And now, if we go back to our weight paint where we have the armature selected and then shift select our mesh before going into weight paint, we can select this top bone and you see everything's purple. Purple just means undefined. So all we're going to do is we're just going to add some weights to the top of our cube here. So now we have this nice gradient going down, and as we rotate this, the cube sways and kind of jiggles. But this isn't really a jelly cube, is it? Because the lines always go between the two vertices. And that's because we don't have enough geometry to support proper bending in this. So the very easy solution for that is to just go into edit mode, select our loop cut tool, and add a couple extra vertices. Now if we go back to our weight paint, and I haven't touched anything in here, you can see it actually bends and jiggles, just like a jelly cube should. So that kind of gives you an idea of the basics. We've already gone through the different tools that you have at your disposal in weight painting, from the draw, blur, average, smear, gradient. The one that we haven't touched is sample, which just lets you pick a weight. I don't often use that one. And then your move and scale tools, because you can just rescale. This is just your standard transformation that you'll see on any pose mode type setup. So let's say that we want to start from something that isn't just undefined. How would we get it to make the weights for us? So if we go into weight paint again with the armature selected and then the mesh on top selected, you can actually do weight paint, assign automatic from bones. Doing this will essentially take the nearest bone and assign it vertices. Now you can see this isn't what we had before. This isn't quite perfect, but it is generally enough to get you started. And this is good for things that don't need quite perfection level, like say my hair is a good example, where it's such a complicated mesh and there's so much going on with it that it's pretty simple to start with a assign from bones and just let it take from the nearest and then tweak the weights as needed afterwards. So that's very useful. But let's say that we want to be a little bit more in control. So if we go back to object mode and go back to our armature, there is another trick we can use. We can use bone envelopes. So if I raise this up so that we actually have a bit more of a clearer distinction between top bone and lower bone, and then we change how we're viewing our bones to, instead of octahedral in our armature settings, we're going to go to envelope. This is the bone envelope I'm talking about, where you can see this inner section is how big the bone is, where this outer section is how much the radius should apply to it, or how much. The outer section is how far it affects the mesh. So in this case, we're going to bring out the transform thing, and you can see the envelope here. You can actually raise that up, and if we raise that up to there, we seem to be covering most of the cube, and we're just going to raise our lower one as well. There we go. And now if we go back to object mode, select our armature, then select our mesh, weight paint, weights, assign from bone envelopes. You can see that one has assigned from bone envelopes. And now we select the top one and do assign from bone envelopes. So you can see that does create essentially the exact weights that we were doing before, with a bit of a twist, because these haven't added up to 100. There is no red anywhere on this. So we're just going to select both bones, go to weights, normalize all, and we can expand this lower thing, and let's not lock active. There we go. So now we've got red on the bottom, red on the top, and it moves like our jelly cube. Now, I highly recommend normalizing the bones, or normalizing the weight paints whenever you can, because always having it be at 100% max is going to save you a lot of headache in the long run. And there's actually a lovely feature that you can turn on. Under options on the right hand side, you can turn on auto normalize. So now if we do any kind of changes to our weights here, and then we go select the other bone, you can see it automatically filled in with the other bone. So I highly recommend having auto normalize on. The other thing that's very useful is the smooth one. This essentially works the same as the blur tool, but over the entire thing. And you can change the number of iterations and the factor to get it as smooth as you want. This is great for things like skirts or hair, where the actual bones don't rotate big chunks. They apply across the entire armature in more of a smooth fashion. So now if we select our top one, oh, and you can see that the smooth that we did not apply to the top, it only applied to the bottom. So this is where our normalize would come into play again. But you can also select both bones, smooth, and change to selected pose bones. There we go. Now that does what we need it to. Now, this can get a whole lot more complicated than this. This is basic, simple example. But let's say that you have something a bit more complicated, something that needs to have a bit more variance in how it moves and what's weighted where. And I believe a good example of that would be, there we go, my hair. Because my hair has quite a few different bones in it, as you can see. You've got the basic head bone here. That moves everything. Actually, I should be doing this in weight paint mode so that you guys can see. Hide that. But yeah, so you've got your basic head bone, which has basically any of the hair that shouldn't be moving. Regardless of how my head moves and sways, this hair should always follow my head. It should never follow any other bones, never like stretch or do anything weird. And then you have ones like the front of the hair, where it relies heavily on not being 100%, and only the very tip is actually following 100% what the bone is doing. And this results in a very kind of soft movement, especially when you end up with different percentages on different parts. It results in things moving in different rates. So you can see how over here, there's like this larger gap, and then as it approaches to the side, as this speeds up or follows continuously, whereas this one isn't as affected as much, that gap closes. Now that is great for when you have something like hair that is not exactly staying its shape the entire time. It stays close, but you're going to have more unique motion than anything else. But that's still just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this. Because you might have this section of hair here, where it's got 3 different pieces to it. The first bit is the primary chunk of hair. So I like to do this by always starting at the root, and anything that should move in that chain at all goes onto the root first, and you normalize later. So this carries all of this hair. This brings all of this out to the side. And if you notice, I actually have this to where, I'm trying to see if I can show you with it sideways, but it doesn't quite work. This brings everything out. And then these later portions are more for the finer movement, the things that make it look fluffier, essentially. And one of the things that is best recommended is if you have a bone that you know you want to be able to rotate to like this crazy degree, just pull it to that degree and see where things clip and see what you need to do. Because one of the nice things about weight painting is you can just live edit it while it's put in whatever position you want. So that is my best tip for how to get crazy motion out of your weight painting, is to just put it to the degree you want it to, and then figure out how it actually joins. Because like with so much of this other stuff with 3D modeling and all that, practice is the best thing you can do, because you're essentially being given tools and have to make art. And art is a messy process, so please forgive yourself if you end up messing something up, or if you like lose track of what you're doing on a model, or if you have to redo something 3 times, because I've done that many times. So yeah, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, just reach out to me. You can either leave it in the comments or just on my Discord. I have a help needed section there, and I'm happy to help anyone who has any questions with this kind of stuff.